You know, the trailers for The Smashing Machine were very misleading. I thought this was going to be a movie about a UFC fighter, but instead what we got was a family-friendly action-adventure movie where they had to find some magic tree and oh, you know what happened? I think I accidentally got high again and watched Jungle Cruise on Disney+. God, you'd think I'd learn after the 6th time. But yes, today we are discussing The Smashing Machine, starring Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt, and is directed by Benny Safdie. Now, at the showing I was at, Emily Blunt and The Rock actually surprised us by showing up and actually introduced the movie for us.
I want to introduce my amazing co-star, a force of an actor, Emily Blunt.
But I'm not gonna let that persuade me, okay? You know, I'm not gonna be persuaded by Emily Blunt's beautiful eyes or The Rock's chiseled pecs, okay? I'm giving a fair, honest review. But since The Rock and Emily Blunt showed up at my theater, I might bump it up a little. Now I'm gonna do a quick spoiler-free recap and review before I kind of delve into spoilers. So The Smashing Machine follows UFC fighter Mark Kerr, played by The Rock. The movie spans several years during which we witness the struggles he overcomes in both his personal life and his fighting career. Struggles like drug addiction and toxic relationships. The movie is actually based on a documentary with the same name about Mark Kerr. Now, I haven't watched the documentary, but seeing some of the comparison videos, there are some near identical shots. This movie also made headlines when it got a 15-minute standing ovation at a film festival, which isn't necessarily a good thing, okay? The Joker 2 got an 11-minute standing ovation, Megalopolis got a 7-minute ovation. This is all to say that when I first heard that this movie got a 15-minute standing ovation, it didn't really make me more hyped for the movie. It kind of actually made me more cautious about the movie. But after seeing it myself, I can definitely say this is a good movie, but 15-minute standing ovation good? I don't know about that one. It's more of a 2 to 3 minute standing ovation type movie. God, should that just be my new ranking system? Just how long I think a movie should get a standing ovation for? But some quick spoiler-free thoughts. I thought the directing and cinematography was terrific in my opinion. Benny Safdie has never missed when it comes to the look of his projects. And the acting here is genuinely outstanding. Emily Blunt, although she is playing a highly stereotypical role, is incredibly intense in her acting, even matching The Rock in some scenes. And people are not lying when they say we have not seen The Rock act like this in a long time, maybe even ever. For most of the movie, you forget this is the man who starred in Red Notice. But the plot, it just kind of leaves you wanting a little bit more. Again, I haven't seen the documentary this movie is based on, but the plot kind of just feels all over the place to me. And it felt at times we were kind of like focusing on things that we as an audience didn't really care about, and we kind of glossed over the things we would care about. It did also get kind of repetitive, especially towards the end of the movie. Benny Safdie himself has said that most of his projects take a fictional story and try to make it as grounded and realistic as possible.
I think we're both obsessed with realism. You know, he'll come from it from a non-fiction place, making that fiction. And then I'll come from it from a fictional place, trying to make it feel as non-fictional as possible.
So here it's a different type of movie for him. You know, he's taking a real life story and portraying it as a real life story. And I applaud him for taking on new challenges as a director. His artistic style really shines throughout this movie. It's just I think the actual story wasn't the most compelling in my opinion. Also, if you're a UFC fan and you're coming in thinking there's gonna be a bunch of MMA action happening, you might be a little disappointed. Now don't get me wrong, we do get some fighting and some of the scenes are really vicious. Like you feel the punches, and when someone gets knocked down, you feel like you're getting knocked down with them. But those scenes are kind of far and few in between. There's just not as much UFC as I thought there was gonna be. Which isn't a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but with this marketing, it kind of led me to believe there was gonna be more UFC. Now I'm gonna be heading into spoiler territory, so this is your last warning if you don't want anything spoiled. I'm first gonna go through the stuff that I liked and then kind of head into the stuff I didn't really like. First off, this movie looks and is shot beautifully. This movie almost feels like a documentary in some ways. There's definitely a very handheld feeling to it. Benny Safdie and his director of photography, Maceo Bishop, always do an excellent job of making you feel like you're there and moving along with the characters. Okay, quick tangent, but if you haven't seen The Curse created by Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder, I truly cannot recommend it enough. It's one of the more experimental television shows out there. Even Christopher Nolan said it's an unprecedented show.
And Yeah, congratulations on an incredible show that's unlike anything I've ever seen on television before. We were talking about it in the green room. There are so few shows that come along that genuinely have no precedence. I mean, you're going back to things like, as I said, Twin Peaks or The Prisoner or Dennis Potter's Singing Detective, things like that. So you're in an amazing space, and I can't wait for audiences to catch up with the climax. So,
But in that show, there are these very long takes that evoke an almost voyeuristic feeling, kind of like we're spying on these characters. And in The Smashing Machine, this honestly just feels like the next evolution of that style of filming. One of my favorite shots from this movie is when we follow Mark Kerr all the way from the octagon, all the way backstage and into the locker room. And then the camera kind of leans around the door frame to kind of catch what he's doing, you know, see his reaction. Now, some people might hear this and think, oh no, that's shot like an episode of The Office. But no, I wouldn't necessarily say that. It's not like there's a camera zoom in every scene and someone stares into the camera. This definitely has a more natural feeling with the camera moving around. Obviously, not everyone is going to love the way this movie is shot, but I personally love it. Now let's move on to the acting. Like I said earlier, Emily Blunt does play the stereotypical, I'm taking my kids to my sister's type of wife, even though they don't have any kids. But even though she's playing a stereotype, Emily Blunt does bring her A game. She gets really intense in some scenes. Like, there's that one line in the trailer where she says, come on, let's go.
Let's fucking go.
And in the trailer, it sounds like, you know, it's a motivational part of the story. But no, it's actually her egging on The Rock to hit her. Now, I wasn't a big fan of like her overall arc in the story, but we'll get to that later. Let's get to The Rock, who is getting a ton of praise for his acting in this movie, and rightfully so. Now, unless you've been in a coma the past 10 years, you know that The Rock has this semi-controversial aura surrounding him of always playing the same macho man character who contractually can never lose a fight. So it's a breath of fresh air to see him in this role where he plays a fighter who wants to be a tough, strong guy, but really gets vulnerable with his emotions after all the challenges he goes through. We even see The Rock lose a fight multiple times. Imagine telling yourself that 5 years ago you just saw The Rock lose a fight. His performance is generating a lot of Oscar buzz, and while I don't think he'll win the award, I do think a nomination is well deserved here. There was a scene like kind of earlier on in the movie where The Rock started crying, and I was like, that wasn't the most believable performance I've seen. But then there's that scene in the hospital after he overdoses and he tries lying to his friend, saying he was just sick and it was nothing. And when his friend tells him to cut the bullshit, we see The Rock just break down. And that's when I was like, wow, we have never seen The Rock act like this before. And speaking of his friend, we have Ryan Bader playing the role of Mark Coleman. And I gotta say, he's the standout performance of this movie for me. Ryan Bader is actually a real-life MMA fighter, and this is his first acting performance. But you cannot tell it's his first time acting whatsoever. He plays Mark Kerr's best friend in the movie, and Ryan Bader does a fantastic job playing this like awesome selfless dude, like someone who you would want as your best friend. And I'll get into it later, but is it bad to say I kind of wish the movie was about him instead? He wasn't in it a whole bunch, but every time he came on screen, you could kind of feel everybody in my theater kind of like perk up and be like, oh, what's going on with this guy now? But yeah, Ryan Bader, definitely the standout performance of this movie. I honestly hope he starts showing up in more things. I think he could really be a good actor. Now let's get into the plot, which again, kind of felt a little unfocused to me. Now I hate to beat a dead horse here, but this is based on a documentary I haven't seen, so I don't know if this is how the story plays out in the documentary. But the movie starts off and Mark Kerr is already addicted to pain medication. So we don't see that initial descent into his addiction, which I thought would have been interesting to see. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this movie's gonna be about addiction, how, you know, it can make you spiral out of control and can lead you to ruin relationships. But then about halfway through the movie, Mark literally walks into rehab. Then we cut to a quick scene, and then Mark walks out of rehab all fine and better. Like there's no explanation on what went on in rehab or how much time has passed, really. Someone might have made a passing comment on how long he was in rehab, but I certainly don't remember it. Now, I understand there wouldn't have been documentary cameras inside a rehab facility, but I don't know, I feel like we could have used a scene or two. It was almost cartoonish how he kind of just walked in and out of therapy, kind of like that Simpsons meme. So then I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, they just solved one of the central issues of the movie and we still got about an hour left. Like, what the hell are we gonna do now? Then the movie introduces an MMA tournament where the winner receives $200,000. And the movie makes a point to say that this is life-changing money. But I was thinking, is money really an issue here? Not once has anyone said they're in financial troubles, and Mark Kerr lives in a really nice house, so he's all fine on that front. Like, obviously he wants to win the tournament, I get that, but it's just, I don't know, why did the movie keep pointing out that, oh, this is a lot of money when money didn't really seem to be a problem? But the real reason we get invested into this tournament is that there's a chance Mark Kerr might have to face his friend Mark Coleman if it gets to the finals. But the whole time during the tournament, I'm thinking, well, I hope his friend Mark Coleman wins it. He kind of deserves it. Throughout the little screen time he has, we actually learn that Mark Coleman trained Mark Kerr. Mark Coleman is a family man who cares about his daughter. And we see he's willing to drop everything on the drop of a hat and fly across the country for his best friend. Even when that journalist asks him, oh, is it going to be hard if you have to face your best friend Mark Kerr? He gives the basic, oh, you know, we'll both give our best effort type answer. But the way he sounds and looks while answering that kind of makes it seem like it would actually be hard for him. It was almost like he would probably take it easy on Mark Kerr and maybe let Mark Kerr win if it came to that. I don't know, that's just how I felt watching the scene. It's just, I think I was able to emotionally connect more to Mark Coleman rather than Mark Kerr, the main character. It's funny because at one point during an argument, Emily Blunt's character says to Mark Kerr, you don't know anything about me. And I was like, she's right. I don't really know anything about her, and I really don't know anything about Mark Kerr other than he likes to fight. But with Mark Coleman, I knew exactly who he was just off a few scenes. Speaking of Emily Blunt's character, this is where I felt the movie kind of felt repetitive because, good God, there was just so much arguing and bickering between this couple. They were like that toxic friend couple you have where it's just like, can you both just like break up and never talk to each other again? Just like every other scene, they were fighting with each other, and then the relationship got kind of very confusing at the end. Like at one point, they have a huge argument where Emily Blunt's character leaves. But then the next scene, she's just kind of back there and is like, hey, I'm back. Then, right before the big tournament, they get into another huge argument where Emily Blunt's character tries to unalive herself, and then she gets sent away to a psychiatric hospital. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a really intense scene, but we never see her again. We get some text during the credits saying they got married 11 days later, but then they got divorced, so like at this point, I just really do not care. Like, I don't think they deserve each other at all. Oh, and for that big tournament, you know, after the movie kept hyping up, oh, Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman are gonna potentially face each other. Well, it didn't happen. Yeah, The Rock got TKO'd in the semifinals, and the climax of this movie was a montage of The Rock getting stitches on his chin and his best friend winning the tournament. So yeah, it was somewhat anticlimactic after what the movie was potentially hyping up. But hey, Mark Coleman ended up winning the money, so I guess that's something. To recap, I do think this movie is worth seeing. I just don't think you have to rush out and see it. The acting and directing are superb, but the story is somewhat unfocused and falls a little flat at the end. However, I do see some Oscar nominations coming for this movie. I probably would give this a 2.5 Benjamin hits out of 5, but since The Rock and Emily Blunt showed up at my theater, I might bump it up a little. So I'll give it 3.25 Benjamin hits out of 5. But that's my review for The Smashing Machine. If you've seen this movie, my question for you is, do you think The Rock is going to win his first Oscar? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.